Nelson Mandela, le nouveau tube du Kid de Détroit. Steve Landmorris interview Stevie Wonder. C'est soul, c'est scoop, c'est chouette, c'est lunettes. Noir pour Nuit Blanche, le magazine du samedi soir. Bonsoir.
Stevie, is it very possible, I mean really, not being funny, but can a white man be funky? Well, I can see that you're not white, but however funky everybody can be, to the nth degree, depends upon how open people are able to in accepting each other's societies and cultures. Quite very much the same as Michael Jackson, you were too a child star. Do you think that it has changed him more than it changed you? I would have a hit record maybe every other year. In 1963, I had Fingertips. In 1965, I had Uptight. In 1967, I Was Made to Love Her. And then 1968, I had For Once in My Life. 1969, I had My Cherie Amour. And then it was in 1972, in 72, that I had Superstition. I don't know, I mean, the point is, Michael started when he was, what, 5 or 6 years old. The kind of success that he has had, you know, when you are the biggest artist in record history, as far as record sales, I mean, something has got to do something to you. I think also with the various things that people have said about his life, his personal life, it really is nobody's business. It's none of my business, it's none of your business, and it's none of anyone's business. The bottom line is that he has given us some very, very great music. He's been with a great producer, Quincy Jones. He's come from a very talented family. And all we can do is hope that we can have, as long as he's alive, to give us that great music and excitement. Now, how much are you going to pay me for saying that, Michael? Stevie, could you please tell us of the day that you went to Motown and you met Mr. Berry Gordy Jr.? The day that I went to Motown was a very, very exciting one. It was almost like being in an actual music store where there were a lot of instruments to play. It was not like being in a studio. And as I think back on that day, I didn't know that I was actually auditioning for my job. I never thought of it like that, but in actuality, I guess I was. But Berry Gordy was not there. The Supremes were not there, but Diane was there. One of the members of a group was then later to be called the Temptations. Paul Williams was there. Some of Berry Gordy's children were there. And Mary Wells was there. I met her. She had just won a talent show from her school, and she talked to me about that. And Berry Gordy came a little later on. He supposedly, when I first came in, was at home eating a steak, and someone called him and said, "You must come and see this little boy playing all these instruments, singing all these songs." And I remember telling Smokey Robinson, who was there also, I said, I can sing better than you. I can sing Shop Around better than you. Anyway, it was an exciting day. Is it true that Berry Gordy was very tough and that the rules of Tamla Motown were very, very, very hard? Berry Gordy was, while president of Motown and owner of Motown, very, very definite about what he wanted, very, very sure. And he believed very strongly in the Motown sound, the musicians, the various artists, the songwriters. And it wasn't so much that the Motown laws were tough or hard. I mean, basically, what happens now with record companies that have expectations of certain records that they put out by certain artists, they just won't accept the record unless it's like that. Back then, a lot of songs were cut, A lot of songs were rejected as well as those that were accepted. And the other thing is that a lot of the artists were underage. They were not 21, or they were just approaching 21, or just turning 21. So there were certain rules and regulations. Like, for instance, there was not allowed any drinking on the buses. Obviously, no smoking of pot on the buses. The artists that were young were told they had to go to bed at a certain time. And everyone who was over 13 was my parent. So it meant that the Marvelettes, who were like 14, 15, 16, and 17, all thought they were my parents or my big sisters or whatever. Martha Reeves, all of them. And it was okay, though, because, as you do know, it brought out some very talented artists.
Stevie, how did you manage to record in LA while another group of musicians and singers performed in New York City at the same time?
There was an experiment done with the Bell Labs, a studio in New York, my studio, Wonderland, in Los Angeles, and Sprint, where they used fiber optics, and they used a satellite hookup, and they used a particular song that I had written. It was myself, Nile Rodgers, and Quincy Jones. A few students from the high school in New York, and a few children, called Stop, Don't Pass, Go. And it was an anti-crack song. And this was to see if, in fact, recording could be done coast to coast through fiber optics and digital. It worked successfully. So successfully so that we're now talking to some people in Japan about building Wonderland Tokyo.
If you will imagine, it's now 1993, and you have just been elected as mayor of the city of Detroit, Michigan. What will you do, Mr. Mayor, to make Detroit a better city?
As mayor of the city of Detroit, I want to, first of all, demand that all the blind kids get off the streets.
On the serious side, I do believe that the things that I will have to give to the city and for the city will make Detroit ultimately the model city that every city throughout the world will want to be like.
In all sincerity, do you ever sleep?
Well, no, do you?
Yes, I do, but do you?
Well, yeah, I do. But when I sleep, you know what happens when I sleep?
Et pour être sûr de ne rien rater de Inarditube, abonnez-vous et mettez un pouce bleu.